Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Lance Wallnau Show. It's always great to be here in the studio. And because tonight I've got my special guest who really fires me up. Mario Murillo is going to be joining us. You know, the Mercedes Sparks, by the way, is with me. I'm going to put Mercedes in the hot seat in a minute. Mercedes, Say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Good to see you there. And she's going to be giving us an update because, matter of fact, why don't you bring Mario in? And I want to give him the update, too. I think he'll appreciate this. Mario, good to see you. And
I'm excited.
I'll tell you what, I just came back from Colorado Springs, curiously enough, because the Fire and Glory meetings that we did, true to the Reformation and revival focus that we have, the after effect of it was that we've begun to mobilize movements. And the movements that come out of the revivals is where sustained societal change takes place. We're not even sure how to handle what God's given us. But Mario and I are looking at this with amazement. We had about 800 or 1,000 mama bears that rose up coming forward to say they're not allowing their children to be cannibalized by the Hannibal Lecters in the pharmaceutical industry or the medical community or in the education community that are trying to counsel their vulnerable boys and girls into questioning if they're a soul in the wrong body and needing to cut off their genitals or have a mastectomy in order to have peace with themselves. The parents are freaking out over how far the loony bin on the left is actually going in order to get to their kids. But it's not just there. We had a meeting about, on the 23rd, Mario, with 35 legislators and leaders in Colorado Springs. All that it took was one invitation, lunch, and we met. And the discussion was, where is Colorado in terms of the follow-up to the Fire and Glory event in terms of mobilizing their own state to push back upon the takeover that's happened there. And their state was one of the first states that was methodically and intentionally flipped. It was a strong conservative state. And when they flipped that state over and turned it into an activist, blue state, they found the formula that they presented at the Denver, Democratic National Convention when Obama became the candidate, and Soros and all the other investors saw the analysis of how lawfare, fake news, well-motivated and funded activists with messaging tailor-made to the specific demographic priorities of the audience you're trying to work with could overpower the sleepy Republican, conservative Christian community. And they did it then and said, we'll do it throughout the entire country. And that's what you're looking at on the streets today, the Colorado experiment. God brought us into Colorado, I think, to begin to inspire a reset and to say, no, it started in Colorado, and I believe God's going to bring it back to Colorado to make the shift happen. We heard one testimony, Mario, I want you to listen to, of a mom who came to our meeting to explain to the parents, to explain to the legislators what's happening in their own state from her own experience. Mercedes, what do you recall of that conversation?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm happy to tell you that story. So we had a woman come. Her name was Erin Luke, and she addressed the whole group just to really underscore how insane it is in Colorado right now, and especially within the school system, where her, at the time, 11-year-old daughter told her mom, I'd like to go to art after school. There's an art class. And mom's like, sure, no problem. So her daughter goes to the art class, but it's not art. It's actually a LGBTQ activist that is there talking to all of the children saying, hey, if you're not comfortable in your body, that might mean that you're actually, you might be a boy instead of a girl or a girl instead of a boy. And so just sent her home with little flags and left her so confused that she began this whole journey of identifying as, well, I'm really a boy. I think I'm a boy.
Well, let me say something. This is really important, Mario. You got to hear this.
Wow.
Part of the teacher and the activist tag team is to say, many of you aren't safe at home. You may not feel safe discussing your problem with your mom and dad. You could feel safe with us. We recommend you don't discuss this with them. They may not be supporting you in your transition. Think about that.
Yeah. And they said, yeah, you don't have to, remember, you don't have to tell your parents what this is. Just tell them it was art. And the name of the organization that came in that spoke, it was something called Skittles. So it sounds like it's kid friendly, fun, but it's really an activist organization. And so she recounted this journey that she went on with her daughter where she got incredibly confused. She started joining like Discord and a couple other chat apps where she's discussing how her parents don't understand her. Her parents find the text messages and they're saying, is this really you? Is this really who you are? And it really came down to her dad just really confronting her and saying, what is this? Is this you? And then she basically breaks down and says, I just feel pressured to do this. I feel like I have to do this. And she's like, but it's not really who I am. And so that was an entire journey. And now her mother, Erin, speaks out against it in Colorado. And what makes it even worse, which I want to bring up too, in the state of Colorado, you have to support somebody's gender transition if you're a mental health professional. So even if you're a Christian, your option is I either need to affirm this or I need to ignore it. So when they were taking her daughter to therapy, the first person was actually affirming of the lifestyle. And then the second one, the Christian counselor, couldn't even address it. Otherwise, they would lose their license. And what makes it so weird is that at 12 years old, in the state of Colorado, you can make your own medical decisions. So they would have the parents step out of the room and then the doctor would talk with the 12-year-old, 11, 12-year-old. So, and it's like that in Washington State as well. So it's really wild. She ended up, she's like 14 now. She's thriving. She's, she doesn't struggle with this anymore. And Erin said, her daughter came to her. They watched Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? And she said, why was I so confused? Why didn't I see it for what it was? And Erin said, because they wanted to take advantage of you, sweetheart. They target and they take advantage of young people.
So a child goes through that kind of chaos. Imagine that they don't have a problem in the first place. The problem's being created by the adults evangelizing. They're evangelizing. Is what the grooming is, evangelization. And getting them as members of their new church. And the pharmaceutical companies love it because they'll make $1 million per lifetime client with the transition. Once you start, you're down that road for the rest of your life. The reality is, and I said it before, but this is the part that Jordan Peterson pointed out. He said,
right,
look, man, 90% of gender dysphoria is resolved by the time you're 18. So therefore, at a bare minimum, they shouldn't be chemically altering a child permanently until they're of an age where they can actually make a cognitive decision and say, I'm still not together here. I'm 18 or 19 years old. But what really is insidious is, when those children are being brought into this matrix of you're in the wrong body and they have to kind of like freak out their parents and they have to deal with all this psychic pressure and this weirdness, of course, they're going to have all kinds of emotional disruption and they'll be diagnosed as suicidal. And the strategy of hell that these counselors use with the parents is you can either have a suicidally dead child or a transition child who will live. Which one would you want? Making the equation, you could support them changing their gender and they'll live, or you could resist what we're doing and your child will probably kill himself. Because they refuse to acknowledge the fact that suicide can be coming from a number of reasons, not the least of which might be the distress the child is coming under, trying to sort out changing their very identity when God didn't make them a girl and they're trying to become one. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I didn't know if you knew that, Mario, but I want you to know that we're working now with Colorado, and we're working with legislators, working with pastors, leaders, and activists, because we're getting behind it from the fire and glory to the next step, which is how do we stand up for the parents? And I think that, by the way, Colorado is California Junior. Everything Newsom does is mimicked immediately by Colorado. That's why whatever policies you've got out there are on a fast track for legislation into Colorado. And the difference is Colorado is fundamentally not a leftist state. It's almost been taken hostage.
Well, I want to tell you that there is breaking news on this front. In Spreckels, California schools, which is near Monterey, California, a mother went through everything you just described with her child. The child was groomed. She wasn't aware of it. The child began to wear boys' clothing, go by a boy's name, and the mother was not allowed to know what was going on. And when she intervened and found out, she redeemed her child. The child is now a teenager, and she's doing great. She's thriving just like the other one. Difference here is the mother turned around and sued the school district and won.
That's what's happening with Aaron.
Yep. And that's what people need to know. These things are illegal. And the courts gave her a $100,000 award for what the grammar school did to her child. And I think the news of that needs to get out. And I think that the court judgments are going to get even stronger. And the amounts of money that will be awarded to parents will be much larger. And so it's going to give pause to the people I refer to as the alphabet people that are standing there thinking, oh, we've got a noble movement. And I love the way they reverse truth. It's what the Bible says, calling good evil and evil good, and light darkness and darkness light. They'll say something like, not protecting a trans child violates their civil rights. Well, that's not true, because they still have all the rights of all Americans. What is clear is they're saying when you do not honor their pronoun that they want to be called by, and that law requires you to use the pronoun, you have jumped from your rights to mine. Now you're in my life telling me what I have to call you. You can't do that without two things happening. One, you've got to connote that words are now violence. So words are not just words anymore. They're violence. It's an act of violence on me when you don't use my proper pronoun. Second is the idea that my right to speech is now gone. I can't say what I believe. And that's where the rights of all the children. You have one transgender child, and then you have the rest, the 99% that aren't. And the 99% now have had their civil right of free speech overruled by the party that wants to side with one group that they believe is marginalized. That's what's really going on, and we can't let them redefine it.
And you know, Jordan Peterson right now is being forced to go through social media therapy training. The Ontario Psychology Association has agreed together that Jordan has offended the profession because he is thinking independently of the politics of the District of Ontario. So they're going to require him, on threat of losing his clinical license, he has to go through training on social media, how to use it. And his retaliation is, he says, fine. You know how Jordan is. Fine, let's do that. I'll be interested in seeing exactly what you're going to show me. And I'm going to televise it so that everyone else can see it as well, so that we can all be enlightened together by what Ontario has as a social media expert, as though there is such a thing as a social media expert on how to do it. And so he's going to televise it. But it's that disposition. It takes one person to have the courage to do this. And I'm afraid that these moms, the mama bears rising up, are going to be forced into this thing because they're watching the devil come for their children. There's a verse in Romans 13. We were in an earlier broadcast, you were talking about how Christians are sometimes feeling awkward about being subject to those that are in authority. It's like the student in the classroom being subject to the teacher in authority.
Right.
Or you being subject to, you know, the mayor in authority. But there's an interesting distinction. The assumption is the authority is actually of God. And even if the guy isn't saved, you can see the authority is operating in order to restrain evil. And therefore, this is what universally is done. It's called common grace in theology. It's the grace of God that comes upon all governments, even in Rome, where it was designed to restrain evil. And then Pilate was trying to figure out exactly what to do with Jesus. But there's an interesting verse here. It says in verse 5, chapter 13, therefore you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. Now, what really I think is going to start to rise up is when you are being forced to call someone a he when it's a she, because they're requiring it either by law or by psychological pressure, but it's violating your conscience in terms of speaking the truth. Now you've got yourself in a position where the civil disobedience happens. The next time the government says to the churches that you're going to have to shut down because of the new variant, the government has decided that for your own safety, well, you know that verse, neglect not the assembling of yourselves together as is the habit of some. A lot of churches shut down out of a sense of, compliance with authority, as though the authority was legitimate. But there's enough information now to make us all aware of the fact that there was gross distortion. Justice Gorsuch wrote a paper saying he was surprised at how quickly churches gave up their constitutional right to free public assembly by submitting to the ordinance of the emperor when it was actually structured so that they would have the freedom, the right to gather and challenge it. In other words, the court would be willing to take the case, but there wasn't enough civil disobedience in the pulpit. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to tell you that I think of where Jesus said, you strain at a gnat and you swallow a camel. Now, I'm not talking about the philosophers in the world. I'm talking about Christian leaders. I'm speaking to Christian leaders who strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. For example, can we preach to the transgender problem? Do we have anything to say to the emotional imbalances that are so prevalent? We have a pandemic in America, and it's not COVID. It's emotional disorders on the highest order. And I'm going to explain that when I see a pastor say, or a minister, or anyone that's a preacher, well, I don't know how to talk to that. You're straining at a gnat, and you're swallowing a camel. The gnat you're straining at is the idea that you have nothing to say. The camel you're swallowing is the idea that the gospel isn't relevant to what's going on. It's never been more relevant. You know, the guy went to Africa as a salesman, and he's selling shoes. And he calls his home office. He said, I can't sell shoes here. Nobody wears them. The next salesman comes in. He's in the same situation, and he goes, send me 1,000 salesmen. Nobody here has any shoes. And that's exactly the way I look at it. If you're a pastor and you don't think the gospel is relevant right now, I have to look at you and say, what is wrong with you? There's never been an hour where a child needed to know God more than one that's been under the influence of a groomer. There is no parent that is ready to hear the gospel more than a parent who's sending a child into an evil school system and doesn't know how to handle it. Here's where the power of God, the grace of God, the liberation of God, the provision of God, the liberation of God from every aspect of modern life. I've never seen a moment. Every single day I'm sitting there at a loss to give an adequate presentation of the gospel of Christ to what I believe is an absolute tailor-made situation to share it. Everyone watching me knows someone who's going through a trauma. The gospel, if it's understood, and isn't this the punishment of the current modern church? We've neglected the gospel. And in neglecting it, we lost the richness, the vitality, the direct cure that it is. You can't say that you want to get rid of racism if you're going to leave Jesus out, because no one ever handled racism like Christ. The same applies to women's rights, raising a child, keeping your sanity, letting go of the past, breathing the sigh of relief that only the redeemed can. Let me tell you something. I have never in my life found myself more relevant than right now. Every day when I get in that tent and I begin to preach, I see the victims of modern California, and they walk into our tent, and I have the direct and infallible and microsurgically accurate answer to exactly what you're going through. And that's why when Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, I take it one level higher than that. I am in awe, stunned. I am absolutely paralyzed before the glory of the Word of God for modern problems. And that's why we need to preach it more than ever. We need to win souls now more than ever.
And I think what you're saying, that is an aha for me, is, human beings, we simplify stuff. We have certain cubby holes of reference point. When I hear evangelism, I think about someone getting saved so they can spend eternity with Jesus. I mean, I came under Dr. James Kennedy's training. It's about heaven. What are you going to say when you meet God, and why would he let you into his heaven? It's always about leaving earth and spending eternity with Christ and avoiding eternity in hell. But what you're pointing out is, in the real work of an evangelist, you're bringing the Word of God and the reality of Christ's redemption right into warm contact with where the pain and the problem, the perplexity of life is right now. In whatever situation you're in, that answer of Christ applies to that situation right now. It's not about the soul transaction at the altar for going to heaven when you die. It's about the remedy coming into the earth right now. And you're going to be delivering that in, of all places, Los Angeles. You don't ask me all the time where to go. You feel led by the Lord. You go where you want to go. And then I pray for it. You chose Los Angeles. You decided to go where I wasn't even thinking there was going to be anything happening. But you felt led. Talk to the people about Los Angeles.
I want to invite everyone to come to our tent that'll be in the Los Angeles Fairgrounds, which is also called the Fairplex, in Pomona. And we have a 5,000-seat tent. You see it behind us. And we're going to bring in the lost and the addict and the homeless. We're already got our workers on the street coming. We got 100 churches unified behind this event that begins on Sunday, September the 10th at 7 o'clock. And the tent, this important news, is air conditioned and all the seats are free. Here's the really important news. The parking is free. And if anyone knows the fairgrounds, the parking is normally exorbitant. But for this event, it's free. And I want you to bring someone. But I want to make a comment on something very explosive that you said, Lance. You said the gospel is for what we're going through right now. I want to give you a vivid biblical reference to that. Paul tried to go to Bithynia, tried to go to Asia in Acts 16, tried to go to Mysia, and the Spirit of God forbade them to go. Then he laid down one night, and he had a vision of the man of Macedonia saying, listen to the words, come over and help us. What in the world, when I read that, what was that? What was that man saying? He embodied the hurts that paganism had failed the persons. He embodied all of the anxiety, all the fear, all the pain of the current culture. When in that vision, that man from Macedonia is saying to Paul, come over and help us. What does help look like? Help looks like come over here to Philippi, to Macedonia, and get the weight of demon power off of me. Make my crazy mind work right. Take despair, addiction, pain, everything that's current. That's when I realized one day I am going to LA to help the people. Come over and help us. What a concept. What a concept.
Well, you remind me of where the Apostle Paul had to be consoled by the Lord in Corinth. He must have been, I mean, he always writes so strong, but he must have been thinking about the beatings. And the Lord had to come to him and say, hey, fear not, Paul, for no man shall set upon you to harm you. For I have many people in this city. Meaning the Lord was saying, here, this city's not going to be, you're not going to get beat up in this city. I've got a lot of harvest for you in this city. And I think that's true. What I said a moment ago is about you just get led by the Lord. And I always love that. We let you pick where you want to go. It's part of your prophetic leading as an evangelist. But L.A., I was thinking, L.A., man, you're really going out. You're taking on a challenge there, my brother, because I know the costs involved. And I know there's so much division there. But you've got 100 churches working together. Then I had a hurricane. And I thought, why is it wherever you choose to go, a hurricane happens? I mean, we try to go to Florida. We rent a facility, and a hurricane shows up. Then you're about to go there and look at the news. I go, well, here he goes again, another hurricane. But
And what scared me the most is that it was named Hillary, you know. And,
the vengeance.
So and I'll tell you, the reason that LA is the place is no city in the modern era has been used of God more than Los Angeles. It has been used by the devil for evil at a record level as well. So there's no in between here. This is the place where in 1949, Billy Graham put up a 6,000 seat tent in the farmer's market, and his ministry to the world was born and promoted right there. Then we look at Amy McPherson building a 5,500 seat temple for God in the grinding depths of the Depression. And we watched the largest missionary organization in the world, Youth with a Mission, born in Los Angeles. Trinity Broadcasting, born in Los Angeles. The Jesus Movement. But the one that eclipses them all was the livery stable on Azusa Street, where now there are 600 million people worldwide in the Pentecostal revival. That is over 100 years old and still thriving. This city has been uniquely used for good and for evil. And I believe that God has the right to touch LA one more time. The Lord already warned me that this crusade was going to be a turning point in our ministry, that something was going to happen during those 4 nights that would mark the rest of my life. It's going to be a catalytic crusade, and I'm never going to be the same. I know that. I know that LA has got to see the power of God. And I realize that if God breaks through in LA, we're going to make the biggest devils you ever met mad, but we're also going to see some of the greatest witness that America has seen in a long, long time. And it won't be because of me. It'll be because of Christ. And we give him all the glory.
Well, I believe that there's going to be some that are going to come there that will be called to the harvest. I think you're going to have success that'll be followed up by ministries and evangelists of a new type and a new breed that are going to answer that altar call, Mario, and they're going to go back with that impartation that you carry and carry all these years of boldness and clarity and passion and evangelistic fervor, and they're going to continue the work there. I think that it's kind of like with Colorado Springs. What I'm noticing is an apostolic dimension of we don't just go places, but there's follow-up. God has a plan. He's initiating, and I think you're going to see some long-term fruit that's going to come out of that because of the nature of who's going to get saved there that is going to carry that same mantle and anointing that you've got. You're going to start to find some Timothys inheriting something. And I thank God for that. MarioMurillo.org, everybody. You can support him. He's putting his faith out there. He's putting his life out there. He's putting everything on the line for LA. MarioMurillo.org. Go there and give him a nice big offering and sow to the harvest of what God's about to do. My dear brother, time flies whenever I talk to you, and we've got more to talk about. But let's make it a habit to do this at least once a week. What do you say?
I'm there. All you got to do is call me, son. I'm right there.
I love it.
Let me know, because we never see greater results than when we're on your broadcast. Anytime, and I think we just kind of provoke each other is what it is.
I think it is.
I just think there's fire and light whenever we team up, and I love it.
I love it too, my friend. And by the way, you want to go to MarioMurillo.org and get those blog posts. You want to read this latest one on civil disobedience. Got me all fired up. That's why I had to get a hold of him for this broadcast. And we're going to be seeing you all again tomorrow. I'm going to have to let Mario go right now, brother. We'll be looking forward to talking to you again. And I'm serious, every week we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what God is doing now, because the gospel is the answer to the problem that the world has right now. It's not for the next life only, it's for this life. And we'll see you again tomorrow. God bless you. I wanted to take a minute to talk about one of my great heroes of the faith, which is Mike Lindell. What's really cool about Mike is it's not just the pillow. It's the fact that the guy makes really cool products. For instance, I start my day off with my coffee. I had a cup of coffee the other day here in the office, and I said, no, I want that. It wasn't like Starbucks. It tastes better. And it was Mike's Coffee. I said, what is it? They go, Mike Lindell's Coffee. I said, my gosh, get a bunch of my coffees. Now, the best way to start the day is you put on these slippers, right? And have your My Coffee. If you've not worked with these slippers yet, I'm not kidding you. There's a special kind of a design that Mike has put into these with 4 layers of cushion with a solid sole and a fur interior. I call it my sip and slip strategy. I start my day off by slipping on my slippers and having a sip of Mike's coffee. But you know what else I'm curious about now? Because I've got to check out the 2.0 pillow. The 2.0 pillow actually is designed so that it distributes the heat of your own head, your face. You know, you're lying there, and it makes it so the pillow's always cool. Now, I like that because I wake up in the middle of the night and have to flip over my pillow because it gets hot. Mike's solved that problem. I want you to go to mypillow.com, promo code Lance, because you can get a discount that I've set up for the pillows, for the coffee, and for the slippers. And do it today. You'll be happy.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.